Welcome back to Fancastic. As you can see, we have another guest this week to talk through CAS, the struggles, the triumphs, all those things that firms who are either starting a CAS practice or looking to elevate it will really want to hear. So we are back with our resident CAS expert, Christine Triantos, and our guest, Gretchen Naso. Gretchen, welcome to the podcast. Can you just give a little bit of your background so our listeners know exactly how awesome you are?
Thank you. Yes, of course. I have been with what was RKL for 36 years, going on 37 years. I started my career in the audit group and then moved to consulting. And during most of my career, did valuation and operational consulting, which ultimately led to an opportunity to start a fledgling practice in CAS in outsourcing in 2018. And we started with one person and one client, and here we are today.
Wow. Well, I want to get to where we are today. You started with one. I imagine you're going to do the big reveal as to how big you've grown the CAS practice. But before we get to that, Christine, I'm going to hand it over to you to dig into Gretchen's story.
Yeah, I love everywhere where Christy was going with that questioning. So Gretchen being at 2018, I love that. So yeah, just take us through that journey of how you did start from one person, one client, and what that evolved to, and your learnings along the way.
Sure. So the firm had long done some of that traditional, like write up work in what was is our small business group, mostly manual, QuickBooks desktop, and really saw an opportunity to kind of pivot on that work and go in the direction with a Sage Intact, their accounting partners program. So once we learned about that in 2018, we decided to take a leap and really break off. We started this in consulting, and it was a completely different model than what had been typically provided to clients, all really facilitated through Sage Intact and their accountants program.
So you became certified in Sage Intact and started from there. And then did you start with your existing base, or with that model in mind, did you go after new clients?
So we begged our partner group, especially those in the small business service line, to provide us with a referral. And it just so happened that one of our partners was working with a chain of restaurants in our market area. Not a franchise concept, but they had 15 restaurants. And the model was perfect because each one of those restaurants was a separate operating entity. So the ability to have all of those operating entities on one console with Sage Intact sold the partner and ultimately the client. Um,
And so you started that with just yourself and one person?
that's correct. Yes.
And what level was the person, your first person?
She was a senior in small business at that point and had really kind of tapped out or maxed out on the seasonality and the busy season requirements and was looking for an opportunity, had a bent towards technology. So we sent her through the certification process and then embarked on what was a very difficult first client and first implementation.
Right, because the majority of it fell on you, I'm sure.
It did, and we didn't know what we didn't know. I mean, we knew nothing. Um, and it was great. They're actually still a client today. Um,
That's fantastic. Isn't that
no,
fun?
it
It's
is
always
fun.
yeah.
So they went from because you said you described them as a very difficult client right out the bat. They're obviously still with you, so they must have turned into a great client based on the services you offered.
Well, really, when you think about the operations of a 15 location restaurant, and it was all manual, the what we did to financially and digitally transform them over the first couple years was insane. I mean, they went from having a complete accounting department with a CFO and a controller and and the traditional payroll and AP clerks to like one person, one contact. So the amount of money we were able to save them, and then from a management standpoint, just thinking about the information that was available to them on a real-time basis ultimately versus financials that were all 90 days old. We took them from a lot of like homegrown system type stuff. So they were really working in the dark ages.
Right. And not only were you evolving their accounting systems and how they did that, but it was also so much change management within that, it sounds like, because it was a whole new model,
It
which
was huge.
is like, I always, that's kind of how we started too, especially with Intact. Our first client was the most complex international multi-entity, and so you just jump in, feet first with all of that, and you learn, and everything after that was kind of simple. Like, was that your was that your
It was our experience because we figured if we had tackled that and could figure that out, and it was bumpy. I mean, and some months we were figuring that we were losing money on the second day of every month. That's how much time required. And we had no idea what a monthly fee would be. We just pulled something out of the air. Um, and we had to live with it at least for the first year. So, now we look back and laugh, but at the time it was stressful.
it's a learning experience that we lost money left and right with all of our first clients. So from that perspective, how do you feel like you, from a pricing perspective, because I know that that's, where everyone struggles from a pricing perspective. I know you learned a lot, but how would you say that you've perfected that pricing along the way?
One of the most important things we did, and this has really been probably the last 15 months, is incorporating or implementing a full APM model or advanced pricing method. So we are providing all of our clients with at least three options. And that has enabled us to really get to a mindset of value billing. So we are not calculating number of hours times rate, really looking at it more from a holistic standpoint and also what we're replacing at the client. So if we go in with a full complement of an accounting team, what would that all-in cost be for the client? And what is the value we're bringing to them? Considering you wanna achieve some savings, so we try to be about 70% of that all-in cost. And it has been very, very effective. We're getting better at pricing.
Right. Perfecting that. So when you say you have tiers, is that what you're saying? You
Yes.
have tiers of services.
Yeah.
And then you're presenting it as that value based with a roughly 30% cost reduction by bringing you and your team in,
And really focusing on what they're going to get instead of what we are going to do
right?
is a much easier conversation when you approach it from a value standpoint.
Right? I always say that. I always say that we as accountants growing up in public accounting never convey our value properly, right? We do all the work behind the scenes and we make it look really easy and we're not good at conveying the value. How do you feel like you shifted into that true value proposition? And because it's an art, right? And it's like, there, it's not necessarily scripts, but it's, let's create this content and what do we bring in as far as value goes to the clients? How do you feel like that evolved for you?
Some of it evolved out of necessity because we knew that we needed to do a better job with pricing. We had to get to a margin that would be acceptable um, to our executive leadership and really our investors, our partner group. So that was part of it. The other piece of it is really more of a long-term goal on less focus on hours and more focus on outcome. So we have done a couple of cool things like implement an incentive comp plan that's based on net billing, so outcomes. Um, and in a subscription model, I think that that's my philosophy is that's what we have to do, or we're gonna be um, the competition is gonna pull get take us off the table as an option.
Right, right. Right. So when you are perfecting this, and I'm assuming you have some niches, right? As I'm going to assume restaurant is one of um how I know that a lot of us get prospects from internal referrals from the tax partners. How would you say you're getting prospects or new clients that's outside of that circle?
Certainly the vertical approach and getting and really being active as a participant in those industries. So just not attending conferences, but using your clients that you already have to provide referrals, and to engage you in speaking opportunities, kind of give backs. Aside from internal referrals, partner referral would be our second best source of new clients. And that's really being present and going deep in those industry verticals.
Did you have a point in time where you had to prove your service offerings to your tax team or tax partners because they didn't really understand what that was?
Yeah, that has been a process, and I would say that in certain pockets of our firm that still is exists today. It's often confused with a temp. You know, somebody leaves and you're going to put a body there. It's also so that's like temporary. It's also the fact that we were really, you know, the biggest piece of this is going in, assessing, and making change. So the digital financial transformation, that's often lost on our internal, like, salespeople, I would say. We focus on a handful of what I always call them our repeat customers that are very, very good, understand our business model, and can speak to it. And we really do focus on that primarily, and then along the way, educating others. And the best way to educate them, we have found, is to invite them into the process. So invite them into our discovery, invite them to the assessment when we're presenting assessment results and recommendations, invite them to milestones. And that kind of lights, well, there's a light bulb that goes off when they really see what we're doing. Because it's much more than just doing accounting.
Right. So, how with that, how is your staff matrix structured? How, when you think about, I don't know if you have small, mid-sized, large clients, but if you can give an example of what your staffing structure looks like.
So, from a organizational structure, we have a traditional accounting. We have interns, specialists who are non-degreed accountants, and then staff, senior controller, and CFOs. We have a level of mid-management that are our practice leaders who are responsible for developing a practice. So we have a practice leader in charge of CFO services. We have a practice leader who only handles our onboarding and financial transformation efforts. And then we have a practice leader who's really more operational, I'd say the transactional piece of engagements. And then one of our practice leaders, we just moved her to a role that's dedicated to growth.
So, one client can run through all of those different practice leaders?
Not
Like, if it's
necessarily.
onboarding, do you have like a separate onboarding team?
We do have a separate onboarding team, and then that client would move to ongoing services. And like our CFO advisory team is really those engagements that are primarily CFO only. Um, and there's some mix, but we have a permanent assigned um, engagement lead on every engagement.
That's fantastic. So, how many people are you up to now?
We have 50
Wow, that's
um,
fantastic.
team members, and that includes a 7-person team in Mumbai, um, 43 here, and we have about 250, 300 clients.
Fantastic. So, what would you say was your pivotal point or moment that you felt like we went from learning, uh, you know, to thriving and profitable, successful practice?
It was the point at which everybody drank the Kool-Aid, that the best thing you can do is, lean into the automation, lean into efficiencies, lean into standardization. Implementing Flowcast was a huge step for us in getting there. Um, Requiring budgets on every engagement, holding people accountable to those budgets, and that scope of work. Um, and really, the incentive comp plan has helped an enormous amount, because we're creating 50 owners. They're all thinking
Right.
business owners, and that just leads to tremendous results.
That's fantastic. I do think that shifting the mindset from where we have had the standard goals and metrics tied to the team definitely needs to shift within CAS, and we talk about that a lot on our podcast too, and so I love that you say that. Can you and you don't have to give any secrets away, but can you just share a little bit about that that model and concept?
Sure, it's actually it's very unique for our industry in that it provides an opportunity for folks up and down the organizational chart to achieve bonuses that are way above anything that they would typically receive on our old model, which was, oh, this is what you had last year. Okay, we're going to increase it a little bit based on performance. This is 3 tiers. Piece of it is based on qualitative performance, a small piece. The biggest chunk of it is based on where they fall according to the net billings target that they're provided. And the net billings target that we calculate is based on a margin requirement based on costs over a staffing level. But what is really kind of cool is if they exceed their billing target, they get to exceed a base. So they can really hit a home run, um, and maybe achieve like 140% of what would be their base.
That's fantastic, and that takes out the pressure of the billable charge hour budget, would you say?
Yes, absolutely. Because I tell them it doesn't matter. I don't care if you work 1 hour or 100. If you can do this in an hour, more power to you. Take on
Right?
the clients.
Yep.
We talk about that all the time. Christy and I have talked about that because once you take that goal and metric away, you see what true capacity is, right? And you're driving for efficiencies because we push AI technology and everything, but if we take away any of their charge hours that are tied to their compensation, we're sending the wrong message. You can't have your cake and eat it too. And so I am so excited for people to hear about what you're doing because that's revolutionary, I think.
I think it
Um,
changes everything because it also helps us with our staffing shortages because
right,
uh, accountants hear CPA or public accounting and they don't want the hours. But if you
right,
can do, here's your body of work, here's what we need you to bill. If you can do it in 35 hours a week, that's fabulous.
right, right. Yes, I love that. And then you know exactly how much time it really takes on each of those clients. And I always say too, it's not like we're not tracking hours. We're just changing the meaning and importance of them and shifting those
Yes.
incentives.
Right. Because that's rewarding people on metrics or numbers and not on outcomes or effort, I should say. But in the old model, someone who worked 80 hours a week would be thought of as like doing a bang up job, and someone who leaves at 5 o'clock, might be kind of shady. So this is really shifting that.
I love that. Take us through your biggest like pain points or learning lessons or mistakes. I mean, I always can say I can write a book on what we did wrong because we were early adopters, but I'd love to hear about yours.
Yeah, with the whole goal of people listening, they don't fall into those pitfalls as
Right,
well. So,
right.
like, you're giving the warning here, Gretchen, so thank you.
Yeah.
Save the people. Save the people.
Save the
Early
people.
on, some of our mistakes were like, I think everybody does this. So you just take anything just to get work. And it's a huge mistake because there were not clients who were not a good fit. We didn't have the expertise to do it. Um, and, they wound up leaving, and it was a risk because there's brand reputation. It's hard to, go through that with a client. So that was an early mistake. Um, Succumbing to fee pressure sometimes from our internal salespeople, or, referral partners, that we've learned not to do that now. It's just taken some backbone and some experience. Recently in 2024, we merged with or acquired a smaller practice in our market area, and we learned a ton of lessons from that. That we really weren't all that involved in the details. It was sort of like, this is what's happening. And here's the work and the team that you're going to be inheriting or acquiring, and everything from technology, team, client, scope of work, billing, fees, profitability of the portfolio. It has been a really hard, it was a hard like year until we really got to the other side of that. So I personally learned a ton of lessons that way, that I wouldn't want to ever repeat, because it was hard on our practice. It really was.
And I always say those lessons take at least a year to reverse and correct, right? Because once you're down a path so long, like, okay, let's pause for a second and fix. But it takes a lot of time to do that.
It does, and mergers in our industry are completely different than in the traditional CPA sense, because our firm has been very acquisitive, as many of them are. But when you acquire another CPA practice, you can wait until audit season. You can kind of let them do their thing, do their audits, and like the the actual merger of operations can happen over a longer window of time. Um, I look at it like we're all running on treadmills, and you dropped in a bunch of new treadmills, and you dropped in new people, and you had to keep running. Um, and then you expect to like have integration of systems and processes and team, and that's hard when you're constantly servicing a portfolio of clients that need to be
Right.
serviced.
I think a lot of firms, especially your size too, struggle with the standardization of all the people in all the offices, and everyone's kind of running and doing their own thing. Some of them use this tech, some don't. So how did you force that standardization?
So we got Flowcast. That's when we implemented Flowcast. So it was an easier sell to do that because we all had to change. We weren't just requiring our new team members to change. It required a change across the board. And then it also allowed them to be involved in building it. What would it look like? What would the standard
Yes.
processes be? And when you help build, it's much more likely that you will support it going forward. So that helped. And then really aligning on everything from what it will be our standard tech stack. What won't we use anymore? And the firm that we acquired did a lot of work in Google Sheets. And that's our firm is not a Google shop. And they're secure. Our IT and risk parameters prevent that. So that was hard because that also meant the clients had to change. So just, it required a lot of, um, I guess, finesse and trust, that we were really trying to do the best thing for both the team and the clients. And we have gotten to a great place, but it took a lot. It was hard.
Yeah, interesting. I wrote something down that you said because I think a lot of CAS practices struggle with this is the sales and the proposal calls. But if I heard you, I think you said you have business development people that are able to handle those sales calls on your behalf. Did I hear that right? Because
You
that's not the norm.
We have a business development team that sits at the firm. RKL Virtual is a wholly owned subsidiary of our parent firm, RKL CPA. And the firm does have a full complement of business development individuals, and we have one of them is assigned to us, and it only works in virtual. Their efforts are mostly in the sense, so brand recognition, um, and can certainly have conversations with leads and are very good at doing that. Recently, we moved that first employee that I talked to you about, we moved her to a growth role. So she's 100% focused on sales. Um,
Wow, that's fantastic.
so
That's
she works
fantastic.
pretty closely with our BD person, but she's also responding to opportunities directly herself and is now, uh, after the first 3 months, really working on lead generation.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. So many nuggets, so many nuggets. So I would just ask you, Gretchen, if you like any advice that you can give to a growing CAS practice, what would that be?
Um, Well, I mean, we all say standardizing your tech stack is important, starting really focused, and then maybe widening it as you go along, I think is really important. Um, I think the assessment first approach, I mean, everybody's heard that. That was the
Yeah.
first thing I heard from Dixie the first time I
Yep.
ever went to anything, but it's so true, and it makes a huge difference. Um, and you're worried that your prospects won't pay for an assessment. Um, and then, you just have to believe that they're not the right type of client. And it's better to just walk away than try to do something just to get the sale or the new client. Um, and that probably is one of the biggest things. Like, don't be afraid to say this isn't a good fit early
Right.
on. Trust your gut and say that, because extricating yourself from those relationships is hard, and along the way, you wind up losing a lot of money.
Right. And you fill that time with low margin clients when you could be selling it to what your ideal client would look like. Well, I love this. Um,
It's been great.
I just am so excited for everybody to hear your wisdom and your words, and we so appreciate you joining us. Um, so thank you, Gretchen. Christy, I'll hand it back to you.
Yeah, Gretchen, thank you so much. I feel like you guys covered absolutely everything. Christine, anything you think we missed? Because I want to get as much wisdom out of Gretchen as we can while she's here.
So, Gretchen, where how would you say that you were able to upskill your team or find team members to start to grow your CAS practice?
I think that a lot of it was on the job development, and experiential development. It's interesting, in some of our early hires, many of them are still with us today and have assumed and developed along the way into new positions. It's almost like recognizing the the skill set required to do this work. It's, in my opinion, very different than a skill set of our traditional firms. Um, Someone who's not can handle uncertainty and is not change resistant. Someone who's open to learning, solution focused, and can handle a lot of multitasking. And those skills, I mean, it's almost like you have to have a completely different interview model almost to try to get to, would somebody be okay in this environment? Um, we're doing a lot better job of onboarding our new team members and have really taken almost a 90-day approach and are working on even like simulation or like role play, because we've had some catastrophes in getting people out in front of clients too early and they weren't a good fit for that. Um,
Right.
so a lot of it is just identifying the skills needed, trying to identify that in candidates, we've leaned really heavily on our internal professional development team on bringing opportunities to us. We've also developed a lot of our own work, a lot of our own training, specifically in leadership development. So, the last 2 years, we spent a lot of time in developing our practice leaders, so that mid-level management. Promoted a group of people there in 2023, probably before they were ready, but we needed it, and we continue to rely on them, but also along the way providing development opportunities for them.
Interesting. I
Awesome.
know Michelle and I used to say if we didn't scare you, we would always try to scare our candidates. Did we scare you and you came back, then you might be a good fit. But it is such a different personality trait, I would say too, of what you're saying that we also agree with. Of that pick up, put down. Can you wear multiple hats? Can you handle multiple clients? Um, and I love your word of uncertainty. Like that's like spot on. So thank you for that. I know that CAS firms struggle, and any advice that they can get on
Yes.
adding staff, finding staff, elevating them, upskilling them is really important.
It is, and sometimes the worst hires have been internal transfers.
Yes.
Interesting. Very
Yes.
well, because like you said, I mean, CAS is a whole different world. It does take a different personality and a different set of skills to really be effective and successful in the CAS arena. So I'm so glad you asked that question, Christine. This is more gold. Gretchen, thank you so much for being here. Your insights have been fantastic. Christine, thank you for leading the discussion. And listeners, please keep coming back for more guest insights in CAS Gold. That is our promise to you, and this is Fancastic.